Wish TV is Indiana's education station. Leaders are reacting to President Trump's executive order to close the U.S. Department of Education. Many are calling it a step toward giving the state more control over education and federal funds. But what does this really mean for Hoosier students and families? Alexandra Appleton, a reporter for our media gathering partners at Chalkbeat, Indiana, has been closely following this story. She joins us live this morning to give us some insight. Alexandra, good morning to you.
Good morning.
So first off, let's start with the big picture here. What happens next now that President Trump has signed this executive order?
You know, I think that's something we're all finding out together. What it is meant to do, this order, is start the process of closing the Department of Education. As we know, to do that would take an act of Congress. So what we're looking at right now is potentially, something like cuts, layoffs, things that have already happened that we've seen that impact the department's ability to function, as well as some moving of services, according to President Trump, to other departments, to the Department of Health and Human Services, for example.
Let's talk about the full closure of the Department of Education. What would happen? What would be the impact, I should say, rather, of the state if that control happened to seep down into our policies and budget on local levels?
Sure. One of the main things that Secretary of Education Katie Jenner is hoping to see out of this is that the federal funding would move more to the state level and become more up to the state to decide how it spends and receives this funding. And what that could look like is, instead of the formulas that inform title funding, which you may have heard of Title I, Title II, Title III, it would come to us as a block grant, a lump sum, essentially. And it would be up to the state to write new rules and formulas for how to distribute that to our local school districts, and local school districts may have some control over how it goes to schools.
Now, who do you think could be most affected negatively by the department's closure?
There's a lot of concern specifically about students with disabilities, as well as students who are receiving English learners services. There are funds that are specifically earmarked for those groups, and what the concern is if they come to us as a block grant that's then redistributed in a different way, will those dollars still reach those students that it was originally intended to reach?
Let's talk college students now. Of course, programs like FAFSA, student loans. What does this mean for our college-age kids?
Sure, those are more big questions. One of the big questions is, what do we do about FAFSA, which had some implementation challenges over the last couple of years. But what we heard is that FAFSA is very much still open, and it does affect more than just federal aid. It can be used to qualify for some state scholarships. So I think what some experts are saying is definitely don't sleep on it just because of this uncertainty. You still want to fill that out. Student loans, a little bit more uncertainty there. There's some court cases and decisions that we'll be following in order to see what happens there.
Alexandra, what do you think that this is going to point as far as a direction towards the structure of the educational system? Do you see it being uniform all the way, or do you see states really pivoting and just going further apart on the matter?
It really does seem like the latter. It seems like every state's going to respond a little bit differently, and Indiana is certainly embracing these changes and looking for a way to work with them.
All right, Alexandra, thanks so much for the insight on this topic.